And here's the great solution. You're never going to remove that wall. And I used to think, oh, you can take bricks out of the wall. I'm like, no, you can put a window in that wall. You can put a window in the wall and say, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable. Tom, what's it like to sit across the table from me? What do you see through the window?
Hey friends, welcome back to the RESGEN Giving Life podcast, where every episode is filled with meaningful stories and conversations that hopefully help you in your quest to become more like Jesus every day. My name is Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN, and whether this is your first time joining us or your 100th, I'm super glad that you're joining me today. Before we jump into the show, I gotta let you know that if you are a dude in the Sioux Falls area, I want to make sure that you get yourself registered for our next RESGEN Men's Lunch, which is coming up on Wednesday, May 13th from 11:45 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Social, just east of downtown Sioux Falls. Joining me on the 13th will be former Creighton basketball player and current author, pastor, CEO, and friend of mine, Josh Dotzler. The theme of our time together will be being men who live on purpose for a purpose. And guess what? The lunch is completely free. That's right, it's free. And with only 200 seats available, you will definitely want to make sure that you head to resgen.org to get your free ticket as soon as you finish listening to this podcast. So that way you make sure that you get to join us for that day. All right, now that you know all that you need to know about RESGEN's next event, let's get into today's episode, where I'm being joined by a friend of mine who lives in the beautiful Pacific Northwest and whose new book, The Things We Hide, is going to help a ton of leaders and people in general understand how facing the things we hide can lead to our transformation. Tyler Dickerhoof is a follower of Christ. He's a husband, father, leader, podcaster, and author who is passionate about helping people grow, equipping them with tools, and surrounding them with a community to help them make an impact wherever they are. On today's show, Tyler and I are going to visit about so many topics, including living with authenticity and vulnerability, recognizing the walls you have built in your life due to fears and insecurity that we all have, and what he learned about God through the tragic loss of his little brother and how that experience helps him live out his purpose today. So much good stuff is on the way, so let's not delay it any longer. Here's my conversation with my friend, Tyler Dickerhoof. Well, Tyler, my brother, man, it is great to have you on the RESGEN Giving Life podcast today.
Man, it is such a pleasure. Just, as a friend to sit down with a friend and serve you. But, man, I'm excited to kind of see where you take this. And I say that in earnesty because from your perspective and, in our relationship as we've interacted, but also, how I can serve your community, I'm just excited to see what you kind of pull out of me.
Yeah. Well, I love that perspective. And, we were even talking about just how being a podcaster yourself and how these conversations are so life-giving for listeners, but they give so much life to just you and I as we get to do this. Yeah. And it deepens our relationship and our friendship, a friendship that, as you know, began about 3 years ago when I first came to my very first Maxwell Leadership event. And that's when I first met you. And now I get the really, I mean, it's a privilege to be able to hang out with you about 3 times a year when you come from Spokane, Washington. I know, dude. I do wish it was more. And especially, I wish I could come out to the beautiful Pacific Northwest because, as you know, like I lived in Portland, Oregon for about 6 years, and we absolutely love that season of life. But now we love being here in Sioux Falls, but it is quite the distance in between Sioux Falls and Spokane.
It's a little bit. If it's a drive, I've done it a time or two. I've taken the trip back to the Midwest. I actually, if you're watching a video, you see the cow behind me. I grew up on a dairy farm. I own cows. Actually, I have a very good friend that I've been involved with cows with that lives just outside of Sioux Falls. So I've driven across I-90 through Sioux Falls down into other parts of the Midwest. So I've been through there a few times. It's a drive. It's a drive. Yeah. I don't recommend it, but it's a drive.
Yeah, it is. But it literally is straight the entire way on I-90. It is literally you don't even have to turn. You do not have to turn. Nope. Well, hey, brother, listen. This is going to be so fun today. We're going to unpack a lot of different things. Of course, we're going to get to talk about your new book and everything that you went into that and what your desired outcome is for the reader, and that's those people that are going to be soaking in all the words that God gave you to put into that book. But I'd first love Tyler, because this is going to be an introduction of you to many listeners that are connected to the RESGEN family and RESGEN community. So I would first love for you just to introduce yourself just in general, okay? It's a little bit just about you, your family. And then from that point, I then want you to talk about some of the journey that you went on from being a farm kid in Ohio to then becoming an entrepreneur, author, and leadership guy in Spokane, Washington. Okay? Yeah, so that's where I want us to start today.
That's setting the stage. Okay. So as you mentioned, Tom, I'll start here. I grew up in Ohio, grew up on a dairy farm in Ohio. It was a small family operation. Now I am married. My wife, Kelly, we have 3 kids, a daughter who's 19 the time of this recording, a son who is, by the time this comes out, he'll be 18, and another son who's 16. So all of them packed pretty tight together, 2 in high school, 1 out of high school. I live here in Spokane, Washington, as you mentioned. If you guys are watching on video, you can see the green pastures that are behind me, where I often will have some cows, some steers I raise. Is kind of
that's a real background. That's a real background. Yeah, because I remember when we first Zoomed.
That's a real metal sign.
When we first Zoomed together, I was like, "Is that literally your backyard, or is that some sort of like nice little screen you put behind you?"
No, that's real. That is real. Like I said, the sign is real. It's a authentic cow crossing sign. How did I get from growing up on a dairy farm to where I'm at now? It was kind of a roundabout. Like I said, grew up in Ohio. I went to school in New York. Went to Cornell University. Got a degree in animal science. From there, moved to Central Valley of California, where I was a nutritionist for dairy cows for 13 years. First started with the company Cargill. As I imagine, some of your listeners probably recognize the name of that company, being a upper Midwest farming community. I worked for Cargill for 5 years and then started my own business doing dairy nutrition. So I was a nutritionist for dairy cows, working with dairy farms. And along that way, I kind of got to the place where it's like, ooh, you know when people ask you, well, if you had just an unlimited amount of money, what would you do? And man, I thought, I really at that season, I love when I'm doing work with dairy farms and cows. I would do this. Well, that's not true at all, because I sooner found out that wasn't the case. That through the difficulties of the ups and downs, and it's like, God, like, what do you want for what is my purpose, or like, what am I supposed to do? And there was a season in there where I used to drive about 55,000 miles a year doing nutrition, driving up and down the valley of California. And I listened to sports radio. I'm young, in my 20s, early 30s. That's what I did. I didn't listen to CDs on, of great thought leaders like Zig Ziglar or John Mack. I didn't. I listened to the people like Dan Patrick and Colin Cowherd, and I knew all about sports. And there was this point one day where I'd gotten fired from a client. So my job, I get a client, monthly kind of working relationship. At some point, business relationship doesn't go, get fired. Okay. And one of those times happened, and I remember driving down the road, and it was in the season when Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots were just really kind of cruising. And the real motto from Bill Belichick is just do your job. Just do your job. And he was very much the essence of your job is to serve the team in whatever capacity, whatever your unique skill. Like he would take, certain athletes. I remember Troy Brown. Again, we're getting very granular, but Troy Brown, the wide receiver, they were short on defensive back, so he moved him to defensive back. He's playing a playoff game. He's playing like pivotal plays, and he's contributing. Okay. Well, I also, as a Cleveland Browns fan, painfully, because of the existence of the Cleveland Browns, remember when Bill Belichick was our coach? And then he got fired. And he goes on to be the greatest coach to ever coach in the NFL. That is my opinion. Some people don't agree with that. Hall of Fame voters don't. And I'm like, all right, how did this guy go from being fired, go through a little rehabilitation, a couple different teams, the Jets for a moment, Giants, and then is the greatest NFL football coach ever? Like, sometimes it's just the right place. Sometimes it's just the right season. Sometimes it's just what you uniquely bring fits that business at that moment, that time.
Right.
That was a lesson that hit me in that season. So the account that fired me is like, well, shoot, I guess what I'm realizing is they needed me for a season, not like a long, long term. And I knew people that had worked with clients for 25 years, and it's just, that isn't what they needed. And so then I started to understand, like, what am I good at? And like understanding that, well, maybe this industry isn't for me. So that realization at one point, many years later, after we moved to Spokane, my in-laws had moved here to Spokane, 2 little kids going on 3. And it's like, want to be close to grandparents. At the same point, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this nutrition business anymore. It's just frustrating. And it's like eating me up. I just don't know. And ended up taking a job with a company where we consulted commodity markets. They worked with a lot of my clients. And this was in 2009, and I learned a lot. It was the first time I worked in an office and working around people, because I always on my own. I didn't have any employees. It was just a solopreneur, and I learned a lot. But the problem is, as an employee, like, my income level was pretty capped. Like, I was making good money, but it got to a point where it's like, oh, okay, my bonus this year was $3,000. Probably next year, my salary increase, it's going to be about the same. And young family, entrepreneurial mindset I'd had in my own business. It's like, I can keep toiling away, but I'm never going to own much of this. I'm like, is this really what you want for me, God? And in that season, my wife had been introduced to network marketing. She had done hair professionally, and so she gets introduced to network marketing and goes all in, has a lot of success. And I'm helping her. I'm supporting financial stuff, some nutrition stuff, because I kind of knew about those things. Nutrition company, network marketing. And I start to think, it's like, man, this is a whole lot more fun than trying to work with dairy farmers and create diets for cows. Like, actually working with people that are changing their life and like growing personally, and like the major impactful things. I'm like, this is fun. That cow stuff, I mean, I liked it, but that wasn't fun. And so that point, quite literally, is I didn't realize it until this moment we're sitting here talking about this, is when you have $1 million as an income, what do you do? And that's when I decided, I want to be able to impact people. I want to be able to, make changes in lives, because through coaching, through what I experienced, is like, oh, that's moving. And when I kind of made that realization, there was also a point, and this is around 2019, 2020. It's like, all right, had the success, had some ups and downs of businesses, started the personal growth journey. You mentioned John Maxwell, into that world. And I asked myself, what do I want to be doing when my youngest son graduates high school? Now, this was, again, a handful of years ago, probably 2019, 2020, 2019. And I'm like, I want to be able to speak, coach, and, be within groups and like help up-level groups. And so I started that journey. And that started through my own personal development and growth. And like, I got a lot of stuff to figure out. Like, I got to grow, because I was not a good leader. I had a lot of personal development to do, and that was exposed to me. And so I started being more of those rooms with people like you and John and so forth and so on. And started to, I started a podcast, because, I started a book club, because the books, like, they made an impact on me, because I didn't read before. Now all of a sudden I'm reading 20, 30, 40, 50 books a year, because I'm growing. And as the lesson is when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I was a student, and I was sitting at John's feet, and all the people he bring around, and I was just, that rationale of what do I want to be doing then came from that season, and not at the expense of my family. Because one of the things, it's been a very long, slow growth. And you mentioned earlier my book coming out, and people are like, well, why now? And I'm like, well, because back in 2021, when I started my podcast, I'm like, what do I want to be doing then? And I also have learned from people that have written a lot of books, like, it takes a lot of work. And you can go on the speaker trail, and you're gone 3-4 days a week. And I'm like, I want to coach my kids. I want to be, I don't have to, so I don't want to. And, so now I have 3 kids that drive themselves. I have a junior and a sophomore in high school. They don't need me to, pick them up, take them to practice, do this or that. I do have a little bit more time. I do know that at the time of this recording, we're 2 years away from, as you well know, not having kids living in our house. And so now that opportunity to like, all right, God, I'm just following this plan. It's this season. And I hope I'm doing it right. And, maybe there's a little bit of, zig and a zag because I'm still learning and growing. But like, that is what's been in my heart and mind to be able to, and again, my own personal journey of a whole lot of things we haven't even gotten into that I had to transform and work through. And it's like, I want to help others do that. So that's why we're here sitting together.
Yeah.
April
Well, thank you for.
2026.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for the for all that background because it's helpful and will help us get into, I think, the meat of our conversation here. And one of the things that you said that I just really loved is as you're driving down the road and saying, "Okay, God, so like what is my purpose and what do you have for me?" Because I think when we begin to ask that, that's a different question that we eventually ask. But it's such an important question for us to ask sooner rather than later. However, there is part of our journey that brings us to be able to ask that question with our whole heart. And so again, you're on this journey, in your work, but then also in the Lord. And so I want to just shift what I was going to talk about right away and ask you this question of when did faith really come alive for you personally? Tyler, because faith is a journey, and I know that you obviously, even as a family, you experienced tragedy in your family with the passing of your younger brother, and I definitely want to be able to hear some of that and what God taught you through that. So maybe that's a big part of your faith journey and learning to trust Christ. But talk with me just a little bit about your development of your personal relationship with Christ, and then that brought you to that point of saying, God, you've given me a purpose. I want to live that out.
I sigh like that because it's like I'm looking how long we've been recording and I said, Tom, wow, this could really get deep and take a long time, which is great. I appreciate you asking it, and it's also all the thoughts that are going back through my mind of that journey. I grew up Christian home, Lutheran, went to church every Sunday. Kind of bit of peace part of youth group, but it was kind of hard because being on a farm, active, 4-H, all those things, whatever, so many people. Like youth group, church camp was not my growing up. It was part of it, right? Church. But it was also very much, I was in that, I don't want to say denomination, but in that belief cycle or family cycle, this whole concept of a relationship was not something I ever knew or understood. And so I use that to set the stage and kind of, there'll be fragments of pieces and part of the story here. I'm trying to conceptualize how the best way to share it and communicate it. So it's a good story, Tom. You need a good story, right? You mentioned a tragedy, an event. So when I was 14, my younger brother died in a farming accident. I drove over him. He was 3. And one of the things that happened then is, as you could imagine, as you've sat in rooms and you've talked to people, is there can be a lot of anger and frustration. There can be a lot of like, is there really a God? Like, how could God do this? How could he, take the life of a 3-year-old innocent boy? Like, how could he, put this pain and this then struggle from a family point of view into us? That was when I was 14. And so kind of that journey, and again, coming back to you go through the motions, and maybe this is why, just the idea, the concept, and it's like, again, didn't grow up in a quote-unquote sit and read your Bible family. You did that Lutheran. Yeah, you hear the first lesson, the second lesson, the gospel. You know what I'm talking about. You're not new to that scene.
Yeah.
And go to college and kind of much that same, I didn't go to church, just that wasn't part of the college life that I lived. I wasn't part of, campus crusade. It just wasn't my world. But I believed, kind of understood there was God, but there's still that tension. And I remember being probably my senior year. And I'm like, man, okay, go through that whole journey. And I'm like, man, I know there's a God. I know there's something bigger. I know it. And at that point, through my parents' church, the way to kind of profess that, quote unquote, because I'd been baptized as a baby, was become a member of the church. And so I remember it's like, okay, I'll be a member of my parents' Lutheran church. Maybe that's something. And kind of do that. And again, it's just kind of like, okay, what next? Right. And so then I graduate, I moved to California and kind of start to go through this growing up season of life. I'm like, all right, trying to figure my stuff out. And, what I say, the quote unquote help, prototypical Christian walk. I'd say it's prototypical because I think a lot of people go through it. It's just like you're living life. You're partying, you're drinking, you're, whatever, all those things. A lot of people live that life, right? And you come to a point, it's like, is this how I want to live? Is this what I want for my family? And so then my wife and I, we start dating, and she grew up in a very Pentecostal church, very, very rules-based, foreign to me. When I was in California, I started going to Lutheran church, and because that's what I was new and used to. And
what
we
you're
made
used
the
to,
decision,
yeah, right.
we made the decision. It's like, hey, let's be willing to try a couple different churches as a couple. This is when we're dating. Try a couple different churches and find where we feel comfortable. And so I took her to Lutheran church. She's like, this is very Catholic to me. I don't know. This is weird. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. I go to her parents' church. And I'm like, they're dancing around with flags and they're like up and down. Like, this is weird to me. And so we find this church.
It's just different. Yeah, I'm sure it was extremely different. Yeah.
We find this church that is I don't even know if it was a denominational Baptist offshoot, but just kind of very non-denominational. And it was growing. A lot of our friends went there. It's like we went the first time. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle this. We were in this old building, and it was packed full. We got there late. We're underneath this like awning, like there's a balcony up above, and it's just dark. And I'm like, seemed kind of fun, but I'm like, I don't know. But I told her, I said, hey, I'll give it another try. The next time we sit a little farther forward so I don't have something sitting over me. I'm like, all right, we're in. And that was kind of when my relationship with Christ started to really begin. Started going to Bible study group and all of a sudden really got into that and would go on retreats and start reading the Bible. Like, okay, now we're doing this. It's great. My wife and I do it's called Crown Financial Ministries. We do that together.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. Like, I wish they still had that package. I think that is probably the best thing we have ever done in our marriage relationship, period. And one thing that I'm leaving out, though, and I'm trying to figure out where this fits, but it fits everywhere in here. When my brother died, and I'm being questioned by the sheriff, and he's asking me, and I was like, it was an accident. It was an accident. It was an accident. And some people listening in, and they could think, it's like, well, Tyler, did you deal with guilt and just the turmoil and whatever else? And this is where I look back and I know God has been with me the whole time along. Not one moment. Never once. There's never been an ounce of any comprehension of guilt. And I can't attribute that to anyone, anything, anywhere else than God. Because we know from a faith perspective, what does the enemy love to do? Guilt, shame, pride. Pretty big moment in my life. Sitting here 32 years later. And there's never been, and that may seem weird, it may seem callous, but it's just understanding, that's been God the whole time along. Just that. And here's another piece to it. And kind of, so then we go to that church. I end up getting baptized there because I'm like, okay, yes, this is a part of me understanding all these things. And so this continual growth evolution. And about that same time I mentioned earlier, where it's like, what do I want to be doing? In that personal growth season where I sought a mentor for the first time, and I'm like, all right, I need more guidance. I need someone who's, a little bit farther ahead of me to kind of like put me under their wing and help me figure this out. Because up until now, I've been just trying to figure it out on my own. And that's what led me to John. And there's obviously a big faith component to John because I was looking in other places and my wife was like, nah, I don't trust them. It's not a right fit, and praying for it, and end up the first time ever in John Maxwell's community is because we saw an advertisement on Instagram. And it's funny is we've asked the people and they're like, oh, how did you come? It's like, oh, we saw this ad on Instagram. We're like, we don't do those.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you did. That's how we got here. And they're like, to the, I'm like, okay, God, right? That's how I say it. And as I'm going through that season of personal growth, there's a couple very pivotal God elements where I feel like he really spoke to me and kind of directed me to where I'm back to the story, why you're doing what you're doing now. And one of those moments was in, I think it was the winter of 2016. And it's important because we owned a gym at that time. We had our network marketing business. We're just starting to do more things. But I kept finding myself in this same relationship problem over and over and over again. It goes fine until. It goes fine until. It goes fine until. And a lot of that until was where, as I describe it now, my intensity was too much for people. It was too much. I would push a little too hard. I would just, like, there'd be a challenge and I'd be like, let's hold on. We're going. We're going to get through this. And there was a moment where we had just an normal employee issue, young employees, the responsibility of calling off to communicate, stuff that happens every organization. And I'm working out myself. I sit down on the bench in the locker room and I start to drink my protein shake. And this is just me. I believe it was God. And God said, this is how you deal with things. I was open at that point and I was like, oh, what does that mean? And in that moment, I was transported back to, at that point, 20 couple years earlier, to the moment right after the emergency personnel showed up after my brother had died, and they were investigating, they were questioning, and I'm talking to the sheriff, and he's asking me questions. What happened, this, that, or whatever. I'm like, it was an accident. I've said this earlier. It was an accident. It was an accident. And I got to the point where I was fed up. Like, dude, I've told you 16 times it was an accident. Like,
Yeah.
Now I look back and like, you got to ask questions. I'm like, it was an accident. Like, what part of that didn't you hear? It was an accident. And I start to get frustrated. And finally I said to him, I'm done. I'm going to go in that barn and I'm going to milk those cows. And if you want to come with me and ask more questions, great. If not, I'm done. And so it was that moment in the locker room when God said, this is how you handle things. This is how you deal with things. This is what you do, that I go back to that moment, and that moment of just direct, furrowed brow intensity. It's like, I see what you're telling me. Whenever there was something hard, whenever there was a difficult relationship, I just put my head down and pushed. Okay, God, I'm listening. I'm listening. And that is a moment that's very pivotal, is like this faith, this God, this understanding of, you got to look at this stuff, dude. You got to deal with this. And having the mentor like John in that community that took me in, where, as I've realized now, it was my fears and insecurities that were driving that wall of intensity.
Right.
And then there's one more moment. So as I'm going through this season, and it was probably 6-7 months later, and I'm driving my oldest son, home from soccer practice. And I get to this stop sign, and I look to my left, check for traffic, and then look right, even though just kind of like you're turning in the near lane. It's like I look to my left, look, and I hear God again. And he said, "Your brother's life has purpose." Okay. Because up until that moment, if you and I are meeting at an event, if we're discussing, I never share the story about my brother. I just don't. It's not relevant. It has no bearing. Just a couple months ago, as I'm working through my manuscript, my book, and talking to a friend of mine who has known me for now 34 years. And we're talking, and he knew me when my brother died. he lived a couple states away, but he knew me. Went to college together and lived together after college, and probably the person I talked to other than certain family members the most, just that relationship. I said, hey, how much do you know about that, my brother? He goes, I know, but you never talked about it. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately, that moment where God said, hey, your brother's life has purpose. I'm sitting here today having this conversation with you because my brother Joel's life has purpose. It's not me. His life has purpose because I had to identify a whole lot of things that were problems because in certain ways I chose to hide instead of being open, instead of being vulnerable. You know, and as you and I have talked, and we talked about, some of our family things, we talk about, stuff with your dad, right? That you're growing up. And as you and I have kind of, not in depth to this point, but as I relate to you and I think about that and I wonder, Tom, like, can you relate to that? How much of that did you just hide? Because, well, I don't know how to deal with it, or I don't know how to discuss it. I don't know what it really matters. Mm-hmm. But then as I even think about, man, I'm doing a lot of talking here, Tom. You're just great at listening. I don't usually talk this much. I get to ask the questions. As I think about, as you have shared some of that stuff with me, right? And whether it's through this book or a little bit as we've talked about before, when we stop hiding, man, our connections and our relationships get so much deeper and better.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's so accurate, bro. It's so accurate. And, vulnerability is by far, I think, one of the most important things that for men specifically to embrace, but the one thing that we avoid at all costs, unfortunately, at times. But when we begin, and I like to put it this way, I like to say, vulnerability is the key that unlocks living our lives with true authenticity. That's the way that I like to say it, because all
Absolutely.
of a sudden, when we begin to actually show people who we are, the journey, the process, the pain, the purpose that has come through the pain, through the understanding, all of a sudden then we can be the real us regardless of where we are. And there's no question that once I began to come out from hiding behind the mask of, the tough guy mask that I like to wear and saying all the stuff with my dad didn't bother me or, whatever, what that allowed me to do and truly forgive all of those things that happened, like truly forgive, not just say I forgave, and really understand what forgiveness is. See, that's the other thing is we have a misconstrued belief about what forgiveness is. I was just a guest on a podcast where we unpacked that for about 20 minutes. But when I truly forgave my dad, that's what allowed me to truly deepen my trust and love that I had for Laura, whom, because of just the past and the experiences that I had in seeing, the relationship that my mom and dad have and him leave, that I brought all that stuff into my marriage, as you brought multiple things into your marriage. And I was just even thinking as you were talking about, Tyler, about like, okay, so this is what you do when confrontation arises. You just get more intense, you get furrow. And so immediately I thought of Kelly and how I'm sure there was times where Laura and I don't argue. We have intense fellowship, okay? That's what we have. But I'm sure there was moments of intense fellowship that you and Kelly had where that's your natural bent. That's what you did.
100%.
And so
and
say,
her
hey,
her natural response is I'm out.
Yeah.
I'll check out. I'm gone. I don't do conflict. Kelly will say, I don't do conflict.
Yeah, it's very much like Laura.
It wasn't something they did in her house. Like her parent, like my family is pretty intense people, open conflict, right? That's just our relationships. My wife's family, not at all. And that was part of like this challenge and sometimes in our relationship, because I'm like, no, I need you to open up with me. Right. Yeah. Get to that point where my intensity ultimately will bring vulnerability. Right. But sometimes that intensity is hard way. I've learned better, ways to do that now. But one of the things that going through this process, and I write about it, and you bring up the matter, not like you intended, but how we respond to our fears and insecurities, man, it dictates everything in our relationship. My intensity was a bulldozer, and it created separation from relationships. It just destroyed them. Well, this is the other thing that I've realized, and again, something that I believe God showed me. I evaluated whatever, because how it came up like that was nothing other than God. Is intensity was my wall, created the barrier. But there was also another wall that sometimes I would lean on. It's just inactivity. My nutrition business is like, do I have to go talk to that client? Like, I don't know how that's going to go. I don't have the answers. Like, they could fire me. Well, if I don't go there, they can't fire me. Inactivity. And that's kind of like, I know what to do. I'm just not going to do it. You talk about the conversation with your wife. It's like, I know we need to talk about this. I don't know how to do this. So maybe I'll just let her bring it to me. Because whenever we talk about it before, I get too intense. She checks out. I'll let her bring it up. Like, I don't know how to handle this, right? And that's workplace, that's any relationship. So that's another wall. The other one I've mentioned already is isolation. And this is, I bring you a problem, and all of a sudden you look at me and you turn around and you walk out. As I've seen my teenage son do this, you got to have a tough conversation. Put in the AirPods and just go. Like, no. Doesn't work like that. You can't do that. But that's how we respond to those difficult situations. The other one, the last wall that I've kind of philosophized on and like talked to people about is insensitivity. Where, it kind of like intensity. Intensity can, be borderline insensitive. But insensitive is, I don't care about your problems. I don't care about your past, Tom. It doesn't matter right now. Your past determines everything to how you're responding right now. Now, you can either choose to own that or not. It's okay, right? And once you own that, it's like, yeah, my intensity, as God said, this is how you deal with it. Oh, I got to own that. I got to say, yep. All right, my intensity is too much. I gotta own it. But those four walls and how we respond in those tough situations, but then how others respond in tough situations, like, because it's a double, like there's two sides of the wall, right? And it's like how that affects our relationships is everything, whether that's a marriage, whether that's friends, whether that's in a workplace. That's everything. And so when you bring that to the table, do you recognize how you're showing up or not?
And you unpack those, quite thoroughly in the new book that's coming out. And so I want to transition a little bit because I want to make sure that we touch on that because, again, we could make this as long as a Joe Rogan podcast if we're not careful.
We could. I'm ready. I'm looking at my calendar. Like I know we had some time blocked out here, Tom, and I'm like, see how long you want to go. And my next appointment isn't for another hour and a half. So I mean, dude, you can go as long as Thad wants to sit behind the
we
camera.
will wrap before that. We will wrap before that. But I do want to make sure because there's a few things that I do want to make sure that we touch on because, I was so intrigued, and even in just the way that when you were developing this book and the title and the subtitle and all of that, it was so intriguing to me. Even just the title itself, the things we hide, and what I love about the title is that there's an assumption that we're all hiding something. Right, because the reality is that it's very simple for us to do that, and we compartmentalize, we segment everything. We tend to maybe just gravitate towards wearing this mask when we're with these people, and put on this hat when we're with these people, and all of that. And that's just something that I think all of us struggle with at some level. And then I remember when it was up on a mountain about 3-4 years ago. That's where God really kind of cornered me and had me process how much of a slave that I was becoming to perfectionism and performance in my life. And how I always felt this need that I needed to, because that's the way I was raised, right? And that even factored into my relationship with God. And that, well...
Can we sit there for a moment? Can I ask you a question on that?
Well, of course.
That perfectionism need, if I asked you, what was the what was that trying to solve? Was it, and let me kind of, maybe ask a couple, was that trying to solve, am I enough? Was that trying to solve, I have value? Was that trying to solve, kind of this desire to be wanted and needed? Like, what do you think that push for perfection was really kind of like, what was the root to it?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the value and worth that I found if I did things right. And that I needed to do things well, because when you do things well, then that's when you receive the love that you desire.
The
And
acceptance, the validation,
whatever it is,
the worthiness,
attaboys, yep, all of that. And I think that there's layers of that. It's like an onion, right? Okay. And I think that that's just a continual process of just releasing that and saying that, man, it's not doing things perfectly. It's we've talked about Maxwell a couple different times on here, but his newest book, Getting a Return on Failure, Avoiding Failure. Yeah, mine's back here somewhere as well.
Yeah, I was looking around. I had to look right there. If you haven't got it,
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about my book, but hey, let's John wrote the forward to mine. Like, let's make sure you give that oxen his barley. Like, he needs it, right?
But what I love it is the subtitle of the book, I think, really unpacks that well, of yours. What you hide controls you, and what you face transforms you. And so what I realized is that, and this is where I became started to develop all the work that I do through my all heart leaders and all this kind of thing, is because whatever fills our heart rules our life. And and so this idea of what I had fill in my heart was this: I needed to be perfect, or I needed to perform well, I need to get all A's, or I needed to do whatever. And really, all Jesus says is, I just need you to be you, and I just need you to allow me to love you and allow me to continually transform you as you place your life in my hands day by day. And that was a freeing thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things going through my personal journey, right? Like, it isn't like, oh, I did and studied psychology and came up as like, no, I had to deal with some stuff. And it was God really saying, is like, why does that insecurity, why does the intensity show up? It's like, well, because I'm trying to prove that I have worth and value. I'm trying to, like, my biggest insecurity is, do I have value? It's a rejection, like, when people say, oh, do you want to, biggest fear is speaking on stage. I'm like, that's really not, in my opinion. It's the rejection. Are people going to like and appreciate? Am I going to feel accepted? And, through the speaking and through the coaching I've done, and the start of the book is like, what's your biggest insecurity? Because to me, it all stems from there. And what's amazing, and why I kind of, try to bracket it in and overwhelm every time, ask it, am I enough? Do I have value? Am I enough? Do I have value? Well, here's a real interesting point to that. Is everyone living and breathing, and whoever has, deals with fears and insecurities. This is Easter week as we're recording this. And I'm going through one of the YouVersion Easter plans. And it's the conversation in the last couple of days about Peter. And Peter didn't just deny Christ 3 times. He denied him 6, as it's in that recording. And when Peter's in the, standing right outside the church and, the fire barrel and saying, oh, you were with that guy. Oh, no, I don't know. Oh, I saw you were with him. Oh, no, that's not me. Oh, no, I saw you. And the rooster crows. Why is he saying, I don't know? Because of fears and insecurities. What are they going to do to me? Right. Like, if they say, oh, yeah, you are, then I get rejected. That's how he was operating. All right, so there's one example. It's just my theory. I don't know. I'll ask him someday. I fully believe that Paul's thorn in his flesh was fears and insecurities. As he describes it, because there's this element of his writings where he really talks about, I don't want to say trying to prove that he wasn't a bad person because he persecuted Christians. There's almost this element of like, man, I've done bad stuff and God keeps me humble through it. But man, I don't know if I'm worthy. That's how I read it. That's my perception of it. And so when you start to look at that and say, oh, okay, man, these were humans too. And they were dealing with fears and insecurities. You know, that Thomas, like, we can go through the whole, it's fears and insecurities. And so as you share your, like, in this opportunity, do we hide? Or do we say, yep, I got them. Now, how they show up, that can be damaging. I got to work on that, but I got them. We all do. We all do. And so that coming to that piece of vulnerability that you alluded to earlier, which is so hard for people. Because I think it's, you mentioned it for men, yes, and listening in, it's so hard for men. It's also hard for women.
Totally.
Because oftentimes as it's been expressed to me, is my vulnerability costs me. My vulnerability is a weakness. Why are men convinced, hey, don't be vulnerable because, you got to be tough. That's a weakness. But just as much as, and again, there's probably more like faith side of it, but you kind of start the question of it, is when Jesus puts his arms in the air. Moses puts his arms in the air. That's a sign of vulnerability. That's a sign of like, I can't do it. And so when we keep our arms close to our side and we're trying to protect ourselves, we're hurting ourselves and everyone else. The solution is, hey, I just got to put my arms out. I got to be willing to be vulnerable. Because if I'm authentically vulnerable, as you and I have shared, then it builds a connection. If I come to you and the story is, oh, Tom, my life is so bad. When I was 14, my brother died. It's just like, oh, it's been so hard. That doesn't help us build a connection of anything. Oh, I feel bad for you. Like, guess what? I got hard stuff too. Like, figure it out, dude. Right? Just figure it out. And so that vulnerability, if it's to build a connection and that we can link arms and be stronger together, then it's great. It's authentic. It's real. But all of a sudden your vulnerability starts bearing somebody and weighing them down. No, you're like the unequally yoked oxen. I'm putting my arm around you and just dragging you down to death. That's toxic. Put your arm around each other. Be stronger. It's the element of all of it. Is gain strength by sharing with others, not to weigh them down, but by saying, I'm with you. When you're weak, I am strong. When I am weak, you are strong. We're in this together.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because, you mentioned the four walls and then are the response to the way that our insecurity can show up, okay, or that it does show up. So the question is, if we know that this, and we have probably a propensity towards one of them. There may be times that we gravitate towards another one, right? But so we have these walls. We know that that they exist. But it's one thing to say, okay, I know that it exists and I'm fine with it, versus I know these walls exist and I want to break them down. So tell me in just if you can in a tight, succinct way, because I want to make sure we get to a couple other things in the book as well. Tell me some of the things that you've found have been effective in breaking those walls down that you're able to unpack just a little bit, just a little teaser, because we want people to get the book, of course.
The first thing
speak to that.
The first thing is own it. You got a wall there. Just own it. Yep. Excuse me. My insecurity was showing. I was too intense. Yeah. Just own it. Yeah. Here's one of the things.
And what I didn't hear you say there, was own it and make an excuse for it.
No, it is what it is. Own it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there. Because guess what? Everyone else, just own it. Here's the next thing is I used to think that you could tear down the walls. Nope. They'll always be there. Because they propped up at some point and were built because that was a response. That wall will always be there. It's just kind of like you can never overcome your fears and insecurities. They will always be there. It's the classic, Peter Drucker is life's just a corkscrew. You can get through it one time, and then some other challenge is going to come up again, and your fear and insecurity, and it's like, oh, I got to learn this over again. But all of a sudden, once you realize, oh, yeah, my walls, oh, I got to make sure, and here's the great solution. You're never going to remove that wall. And I used to think, oh, you can take bricks out of the wall. I'm like, no. You can put a window in that wall. You could put a window in the wall and say, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable. Tom, what's it like to sit across the table from me? What do you see through the window? Like, help me see what I can't see. And there's a great element here that I had to understand and realize. As I'm looking at your camera, I can read RESGEN in the background. And it's RES, like it's perfectly fine. And there was a time in my life where I was doing some videos and my camera was flipped and the words were backwards. And I had someone call my attention to it. And it just happened to be the words were faith and love. And they're like, those are such strong words. It would be more powerful if they weren't mirrored. Like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I changed the mirror on my camera. And then I got freaked out. Because I'm like, that dude's ugly. Like, he doesn't have the same face that I have. Like, I don't know who that guy is because I look in the mirror and I'm used to that face. And all of a sudden I'm looking through the window. And I don't like what that guy looks like. I don't know if you noticed it in the process of recording. I mirrored my camera so that way I see it because I'm so used to now seeing this that the mirror actually looks like, I don't want to look in the mirror. That guy's ugly. Now I'm looking in the window. Yeah, I'm pretty used to that guy. He's misshapen, whatever. But here's the problem in our life and as leaders. People say, look in the mirror. Great, look in the mirror. I can understand. Yeah, I kind of understand. But that guy's a liar. Those are my intentions. They're not my actions. The only way to know what it's like for me to show up in a room is if I go to you, Tom, it's like, hey, when I walk in the room, how do I show up? What do you sense? What do you experience? And then I can ask you, and I can ask Jordan, and I can ask Mike, and I can ask 6 other people, like, hey, what's it like to sit across the table from me? What do you see through the window? That's the only way to work with our wall. And if we don't take those moments to what I call clean the window, say, hey, Tom, what do you see? Then all of a sudden our window starts to get really dirty, and then we have a jaded view of the outside world. So you have to take the moment, the humility, the propensity to say, what's it like to sit across from me? What do you see through the window?
Yeah.
Because if we're too busy looking at the mirror, man, everything looks great. It's everyone's problem outside of this. It's the excuses. Oh, hi, mirror. Okay, I know what you look like. What do you see? One last little.
That's such a.
Little,
that's yeah. That's well. Real quick.
Go ahead, please. You drive.
Okay, well,
I'm not gonna.
What I like about this is that I'm making you a little uncomfortable because you're not in the driver's seat, like where you usually are. I love that. I love that. But what's so important that you said there, though, is I think we often are more apt to do that in work and in business if we're in leadership because we want to make sure that we're who our people need us to be. Okay. But what as I think about that question, I think that question is even more so important for us to say that to our spouse and say, what's it like being married to me? For our kids, hey, what's it like having me as your dad? What's it like for me as your friend, right? To the people that know us to the deepest level. And especially those guys in our life that will be honest with us and tell us what we're really like. Because when we get those honest answers, Tyler, I think then all of a sudden we have to decide what we're going to do with those answers. Are we going to lay down our pride and say, okay, this is my natural bent. Okay. I'm an intense person. I tend to be insensitive or, isolate or whatever. And I'm going to be okay with that. Or am I going to put those daily into the hands of the Lord and say, God, I need your help. Like I need your help to take my natural makeup, which is, by the way, we all have this sinful nature that we never get rid of, and place that in and say, God, would you help me be more sensitive today? Would you help me utilize that intensity in a positive way that speaks life, that brings warmth into a room? Because as you were even speaking about coming into a room, it's not even just about it's how do people feel when you walk into the room?
Yes.
How does your family feel when you walk into the house after work? When you wake up in the morning and you greet them for the first time, what are you making them feel as they start their day? Such an important question for us to ask. And so sorry to interrupt you on your answer,
Yep,
but
no,
I wanted to make sure that was something that's where my mind
great.
went to and thought about, because it's so easy for us, especially as leaders, if we're out there in the working world and we're doing evaluations and we're trying to make sure that we're hitting numbers and doing all the things in the working world. And then when we ask that for our employees, sometimes it's even, can the employee, do they feel like they can be honest with you? And have you created that environment?
Yeah. Well, and that hinges on where it becomes so daunting and stressful, is when you are being one place in one situation in relationship and you're being something somewhere else. That's what becomes so heavy, where the opportunity to realize, like, I just need to be my authentic self. Now, that isn't licensed to be an a-hole. No.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, this is just who I am. You got to deal with it. Like, no. This desk, the bookshelf behind you was at one time a tree. If it was a tree and it was unmilled, unsanded, that's going to give you splinters. But it's now all of a sudden you can rub up against it. It's nice. Well, that's what we need to do as people. It's okay, right? To be sanded down, to bring out the beauty. And we only do that through others, the iron sharpening iron, like all those things. But what happens is when I show up, and you mentioned this earlier, when I show up in one situation or relationship differently than another, we go through cognitive dissonance and we are overwhelmed. And it's when you can say, this is who I am. I own it. I understand this is being difficult. I'm working on that. Help me work through it. And then all of a sudden people walk into a room. It's like, there's my friend Tom. And Tom's always the same person. Now he has variances, right? Days and this or that. But I know he's going to walk in and we're going to, connect. Instead of one day I walk in and Tom's like, oh, hey, Tyler, how you doing? The next day it's like, do you even see me? Am I worthy of your presence, right? And to me, when those show up, and that can be in same people or that can be in different rooms, and you're like, dude, what's going on? Like, why is he so disingenuous? Where's the authenticity? And you start to play, realize, oh, they're playing their game because they're not comfortable with themselves and they're trying to, it's this whole game. And you're like, I'm done. I'm going to be me. I'm going to try to bring out the best in yourself and others. And that's what I'm going to aim to do. And if I can do that, man, then God's taking me on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. And that consistency is so crucial. And that's what you're hitting on so much is just that the most important characteristic for us as people, and especially as Christ followers, is to strive for consistency, admit that we struggle with that, and for the Holy Spirit to just continually work in this and say, God, help me stay in just help me be consistent regardless of where I'm at and who I'm with. And
here's what takes away from our consistency: the things we hide. I just listened to a podcast with Carrie Newhoff and Carl Lentz. Now, I don't know anything about what's happened to Carl the last 5 years. I haven't really paid attention, but I know Carrie, and I listened to podcasts. They had a 2-hour and 45-minute conversation. 18 times. Because I did the transcript. I figured 18 times Carl mentioned the hide or hiding. 18 times. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because it is a big deal, let me have you just talk for a few minutes about the book. Obviously, I know what prompted you to write it, but as you were writing it, as the manuscript is done, the release is happening here in just a short amount of time. What is your hope and desire for the people that read and or listen to the book, The Things We Hide? And then I'm going to give you a chance to kind of do something at the end of our podcast that I ask all guests to do, and we'll wrap up our time together. But what's your desired outcome for people? Because you wrote it for people. We've talked about that throughout this podcast, where you said, "Man, I want I just want to impact and I want to influence. I want to pour my life out for people. I think that's why that you and I have the connection we do, because we desire just to love people and pour our lives out for them. So I know that was the heart behind this. But what's your hope for people as they read this?
Twofold. It's okay. We all have things we hide. And number two is there is a way to free yourself from that. And that process is recognizing, you have fears and insecurities, the things you hide. You just own them. But then there's also a process of being able to reframe the mindsets and beliefs that keep those things we hide imprisoned. The ability to, sit across from someone and say, yeah, I'm dealing with stuff. Now, do I need to tell everyone I'm dealing with stuff? No. But God will give you people in seasons and relationships to say, hey, I need help. Are you open to that or not? And so kind of that ability to say, yeah, it's okay. We all have things we hide. But it doesn't mean it's the way that we need to live. And we have the agency to develop a skill set, a strength, an opportunity. I had to do it. I know it's possible. I don't think I'm grossly unique. But I also know that there's a lot of people that allow the things they hide, as you mentioned earlier, to control them. And we can face them, and it'll transform you, and that freedom to do. And my encouragement is, this is what I tell my community, is you have to do the work on your own, but you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, right.
You have to do the work on your own, but you don't have to do it alone. I'd say it's almost impossible to do it alone. That's my theory, but.
Yeah. Well, and it's so true. And you said something there that made me think of something that I had in a conversation. It was with the speaker panel at the Men's Summit a couple of years ago. Yeah. And we were talking about just living with authenticity, and the role that vulnerability plays. And I had, it was just myself and Brian Loritz and Derwin Gray and Ted Cunningham. Okay. I think that's who was on the stage. We were just having this conversation, and Brian Loritz said something that was really important. And he said, I think it's important for us to understand that God calls us to be authentic with all, but and vulnerable with few. And what he meant by that was that when you are authentic, you're being real. You're being consistent. You're being who you are, and presenting yourself as you really are. Again, not as liberty to be a jerk, like you said earlier, but just as saying, hey, listen, even if it's just, I am a work in progress, because let's be real, every single one of us is a work in progress. And God is continuing to shape and form us. We're the clay that we need to continually place in his hands. And so, but that doesn't mean that we have to share everything with everybody. That there's a group of individuals, this community of saying, okay, yeah, you're doing your work on your own, you and the Holy Spirit, okay? You're doing the work there, but you're not doing it alone, because you're doing it with those bands of brothers, with your spouse, with these people that are processing with you and journeying with you, the truth tellers in your life. And I think that's such an important thing.
Two things to hinge off that. Craig Rochelle many, many years ago said, a leader must always tell the truth, but they don't have to tell all the truth, right? There's a time and place. And number two part that I want to go back to the authenticity and vulnerability, which it was a great point. And this is one of the things that I've understood about vulnerability. Vulnerability is appropriate when it enhances a connection. Vulnerability is important, and it's essential when it enhances a connection. Being vulnerable to just say, what? No, it's to your point, you got to use it in the right place, right? And to me, it's always about enhancing a connection. And that's a relationship. That is how you serve people. Now, that could be a connection to 5,000 when you're standing on stage in front of everyone at RESGEN, men's conference. It could be. Vulnerability is appropriate there if you're trying to connect with that crowd. We know someone that does that really well. But you walk down the hall in a conversation with someone else, that same vulnerability is not going to enhance that connection. Yeah. So don't bring it to the table. And I think that to me is what's something that I really have learned through this process and continuing to hone is vulnerability is all about connection. Authenticity is who you are. authentic vulnerability is all about enhancing connections, because connection is the only way that you can influence people. It's the only way.
That's so good. Yeah, that's so good. And you know where that vulnerability starts, and then we'll end our convo here, Tyler. But where that vulnerability starts is with Christ, is where we can pour out our heart like David does in the Psalms, and say, God, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm struggling with. This is my challenge.
Yeah.
And knowing that He hears and that He cares. And then he says, but even though this is my experience, I trust you. I put my trust in you. And what I love about what you said there is that without that vulnerability, we will not be able to deepen our connection with Christ. And without that connection with Christ, as deep as that can be, it will hinder our connection to our horizontal relationships as well. Yeah. And so such a good point and a great way to end our conversation here. So before I ask for this, we call it the final word. Okay. So this is,
I want to hear it.
It's
I'm
something
excited.
that we call it at the end of, but before we get into it, I do want to say, if someone wants to connect with you, if someone wants to, obviously they can pre-order the book. When does the book launch?
June 9th is the release date. So pre-order.
Yep, so it's coming out this summer. You can pre-order at your website, right?
Yep. Or you can go to thethingswehidebook.com. Thethingswehidebook.com. You can go buy a single copy there. I would encourage you to buy multiple copies, actually, and share this with people to be able to understand those walls, to have that common language. So you can sit down with people. It's like, oh yeah, hey, you're intense. Yeah, it is. But you start to identify that. It's my encouragement.
Yeah. And then if they want to connect with you personally, obviously you got all the social media, you got all the
all the social media. Look for the Tyler Dickerhoof who's bald. There's actually 2 other Tyler Dickerhoofs. So we're related somehow, some way, distantly, right? It's a small name. Oh yeah. So look for the bald one. There's only 3, right? And at the same point, you go to my website, tylerdickerhoof.com, but YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those places. So, and you can also listen to my podcast, the Tyler Dickerhoof Show.
That's right.
But,
the Tyler Dickerhoof Show. All right, brother. Well, hey, so we end each episode of the RESGEN Giving Life podcast with what I call the final word. And it's just 30 to 90 seconds of whatever the Lord lays on your heart to share with listeners or viewers. Could be a scripture, could be a word of encouragement, could be circling back on something that we've already visited that you want to double down on. But it's just kind of the final word to end our time here together that we'll send listeners off with.
I have 2 words. Thank you. That's it. I thank you for the opportunity, Tom. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for the space that you created for honestly, for me, going through some of the stories you asked, but things that I hadn't necessarily talked about yet. And so, thank you.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. And what I do love is that through our conversation, our relationship deepened. And I believe that every time we have these kinds of conversations, I hear later on from listeners and viewers how helpful it was to them in an area of their life that they maybe hadn't really processed or thought about as well. So the appreciation goes both ways. Thanks for being willing to come and join me on you're just hitting lunchtime out there, so you're gonna tear into a sandwich or something as we're wrapping this recording up. But thanks for spending your time, pouring your heart, sharing a little bit of your story with me and the RESGEN family, and excited to see how God uses this book and how He continues to use your leadership to not just impact people, just in all the different circles you run in, but especially in your home, as you've got a very busy home right now with a couple more graduations coming up in the coming years, and your daughter in school and all that. So anyway, bless you, my friend. Thank you. Thanks. So thankful for your time here with me today.
Thank you.
Man, such a meaningful conversation with Tyler today. If you're interested in connecting more with him, I encourage you to follow him on each of his different social media platforms, as well as head to tylerdickerhoof.com to find out more about his new book releasing this summer, entitled The Things We Hide. If you enjoyed the episode today, I would absolutely love it if you took 30 seconds to leave a review, to subscribe, and also share it with others in your relational world. This will help us continue to give life and encourage others through the podcast. One final reminder for the dudes in the Sioux Falls area, the next RESGEN Men's Lunch is coming up on Wednesday, May 13th from 11:45 to 1 at the Social in Sioux Falls, and I'd love for you to join us. For more information and to reserve your spot, head to resgen.org. And remember, we've only got 200 seats available, so don't delay and get your ticket today. All right, that's all for this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and until next time, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see you soon.